Hello and welcome to the Broadcast Newswrap, keeping you across the biggest news stories in the world of TV. Last week, 20 women made accusations against the actor Noel Clarke. It reignited heat and anger around this type of behaviour thrives within the TV industry structure. Joining myself and Max Goldbart this week are two women on the forefront of this campaign, Beale and Alex Pumfrey, who discuss their reactions to the Noel Clarke accusations and share some of their solutions to tackling TV's HR conundrum. All that, plus a little bit of what we've been watching on this week's Broadcast News Wrap. Beale is a freelance development producer currently working for Objective Media Group. Last year, she was elected Bectu's unscripted bullying and harassment officer and quickly initiated the union's Unseen On-Screen campaign, which led to an outpouring of harrowing accounts of bullying from across the industry and has helped to really flip the conversation. Alex Pumfrey is the chief executive officer of the film and TV charity. She released a statement in the wake of the allegations last week, calling them utterly unacceptable and urged collective action to be taken to ensure people in positions of power aren't able to abuse it. And I thought, Alex, I might start with you first. Kind of what were your initial reactions to the Noel Clarke news when it broke last week?
I think, like many people, I've run the whole gamut of emotions from horror and anger to, moments of despair as well, because we've been, many of us have been talking about the bullying and harassment problem of the industry for, a period of time now, and that this level, this depth and breadth of abuse can persist today is it's really just massively saddening to all of us, and I think it's indicative of a wider and endemic problem within the industry.
And then Meriel, kick straight to you then. How about you?
Yeah, similar. I also felt huge disappointment. There was a definite reaction of, oh no, really? I know it's just allegations at this point, but a sense that, somebody that's been held up to be a strong progressive figure who's had to battle to get where they are, somebody that we're all supportive of. And once again, we're in this situation where it's women who are bearing the brunt of things and it's not considered unacceptable. And that's when my WhatsApp messages started going crazy. And that's when everybody started getting really angry.
Were you? I wondered if you guys were. It's such a big story, specifically Noel Clarke, and it obviously was such a bombshell in the sense of him having won basically the highest award that can be bestowed on anybody, like in the industry, like outstanding contribution from BAFTA. So I was wondering if you guys were surprised by both the person and also the behavior, or did it come to you as something that you had expected some kind of big star to be engaging in that behavior for a long period of time? Maybe Meriel, we could start with you on that.
It's not something I expect, but it's not something that's a particular surprise when I hear about it. I think that there are always conversations going on within the industry about problematic people, and as the phrase that really struck home with me when those women were speaking about their experiences was operating in plain sight. So there is a sense of not being that surprised, but just being really, really let down.
Definitely. I was thinking in terms of kind of, it's definitely I'd say the last year, kind of more and more people are coming out, more kind of people are being exposed, and it feels kind of like it's snowballing a little bit. It obviously shows that the problem is really endemic. And I wondered, maybe Alex, why do you think it is so endemic? What kind of about the industry, I guess, kind of feeds it, if that's what you see is correct?
Yeah, I think there's a lot about the structure and the culture of the industry that unfortunately lends itself to bad behaviours and abuse of this nature. And the fact that we're a predominantly freelance workforce, more than half the people working within the industry are freelance. So they're working from project to project. And, we learned a lot when we did our Looking Glass survey back in 2019. And I think the same would be true now, that people feel there is a lack of professionalism very often in those environments, basic behaviours that I think would I as part of the charity, I work in an office environment, and I often say if some of those behaviours occurred in the environment I work in, or the environment that you work in as journalists, it would be deemed utterly unacceptable. And I think culturally a lot has been deemed to be acceptable that outside the bubble of our industry simply would not be. But that project-based structure means that people, financially always have to be on the lookout for their next job and their next gig, and that makes it, really hard to put up your hand about issues that you've experienced, because people's greatest fear is that they will be labelled a troublemaker, that will be a black mark against their name, and this creates a kind of veil of silence that precludes people naturally from speaking up. And I think how we as an industry work together to create safety for individuals to be able to speak up and report these incidents, hopefully before it reaches the scale and gravity of the situation with Noel Clarke, I think is a really, it was always a pressing question, which has been thrown into an even sharper focus by the events that we heard about at the end of last week.
Meriel, we were just talking before we started the record. You wrote an open letter this week urging a rethink of the culture of TV and film. You said it is time to put an end to this culture that turns a blind eye to predators and harassers operating in plain sight. At this point, it's amassed nearly 1,000 signatures, including some very high-profile people. So what drove you to write the open letter, first of all?
It was a sense of anger from the Noel Clarke story, but also, so as I say, my WhatsApps were going crazy. Every single person seemed to have their own story, not with him, but with other people. And I thought, this is unbelievable, isn't it? That it's been normalised, it's been accepted, it's been kind of, it happens so often that everybody just gets on with it. And it felt a bit like the Emperor's New Clothes. I thought, if I sort of stick my head above the parapet here, will people back me up and say, actually, yes, this is wrong? Or will everybody go, no, it's fine? And luckily, everybody seems to say there is a problem.
Staying on the letter quickly, I kind of wanted to unpack a little bit more and kind of read one line from it that really stuck out to me. It's where you talk about microaggressions, and it says, it kind of refers to a few, saying a young female runner taking a joke of being asked for a gangbang by her senior male producer. How does she handle a Twitter account being set up in her name with inappropriate tweets sent to presenters she's working with? And these kind of like microaggressions, totally, but kind of not as explicit, not as obvious. And those kind of types of behaviours that kind of often relayed off as jokes, say, quite often are kind of quipped, oh, you can't handle the joke, those types of things. I wonder, why do you think they don't get reported in the same way as other kind of incidents get reported?
Well, I mean, if you put yourself in that position and you're the only woman in a room full of men and you're the most junior person there, and it's your boss that's making those comments, I think it's easy to maybe understand why you go away and you think, well, that was horrible, but maybe it's a one-off, so maybe it won't happen again. And maybe you don't even know who you could turn to. Who would you trust? So I think that is one of the reasons why I'd like to see a very clear person who's on productions, in the way that we now have COVID supervisors, the kind of equivalent of that to somebody that can be turned to as a trusted, independent person that people can go and talk to.
Yeah, so that's kind of, again, like a HR professional, but they would be on set, on every set, that there would be the person that you'd go to report things. Is that kind of what you're calling for?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously it's a budget issue, but I think I'd put that to one side for a moment and just think about shifting things, hugely. There needs to be a huge shift. This has been accepted for too long. And women are really angry. There's a real sense of anger out there at the moment. On
the budget thing, do you think that's why that it hasn't already been as a standard, having somebody on set in that capacity? It's been around budgets.
I'm sure that would be considered an excuse, but I think it just hasn't come up. I just don't think this has been discussed properly. And I mean, there's so much that we could talk about. But even saying, when I said to you just then, women are really angry, I immediately wanted to qualify it and say, because we're not really allowed to be angry. We're considered hysterical or oversensitive or lots of other things. But no, I think it's time to accept women's anger and to just say, actually, we need to listen to them.
Yeah, would you concur with that, Alex? We can talk maybe in a little bit more detail about how this process would work. But I was struck by a tweet. I can't remember who was tweeting, but I was struck by a tweet I saw a few days ago that said something like, there are 7 HR professionals in a TV industry of 70,000 people. So 1 HR per 7,000, which, is sort of signposting how these things are allowed to happen. So clearly a designated individual is something that would hopefully go some way to helping solve that. So what do you think about all of this, Alex?
Yeah, I think, look, it's this problem of endemic bad behaviour is very complex, and it is cultural and it is structural. And I think from all the work that we've done, led by Lucy Talon, who heads up our bullying and collective accountability work, what we know is there's no silver bullet solution. It's, I think it's a problem that needs to be tackled from many different angles simultaneously. And that requires many of us to be able to work together, with real resolve and commitment to try and move the needle on these problems. And I think it takes lots of different actions working in concert. And I think, at this point, what's really important is that the industry can come together, both the industry bodies, which Meriel and I are both part of, and the commissioners and those with decision-making power, to look at, all the things we can do, because it is about making the right pledges, it is about having the right policies in place, it is about having the right reporting structures and promoting those reporting structures, it's about supporting the individuals, it's about having a greater presence on set, as Meriel says, and all these things need to work together, and I think that's the only way that we are going to have an impact. And what I think a positive that could come out of this would be to galvanize that cross-industry effort and to pull everyone together, for us to kind of double down on our efforts to make a change. So I mean that's a messy answer, but I think it's a messy problem, and I just don't think there are easy answers to it, and we need to recognize that.
And prior to, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of work to come, but it also sounds like that's already started to an extent. So is what's happening at the moment to kind of set the wheels in motion to make some of these changes?
Well, I think that there is work, to be optimistic. I think there is work that's underway. On the 17th of March, a number of organisations across the industry came together to restate their commitment to root out bullying and harassment in the industry. I think the events of the last few days is, more proof, if it were ever needed, about the importance and the urgency of that. BAFTA and BFI have their checklist. We've been developing, our role is in providing direct support to individuals, and we've been launching new resources that can do that. So our dedicated bullying advisor that's available through our support line that can help someone navigate their options if they've experienced bullying, and an incident recording tool called Spot, which helps you make a really comprehensive record of an experience you've had, that we know can both help you process that incident and also gives you something if you do want to escalate that incident. But I think there is a question now of kind of what more and what next. Where do we go next? Because clearly none of those things are all useful, but not going to be sufficient to solve a problem of this nature. And that's where I think the industry's got to come together. And I think we've collectively got to try and figure out a bunch of answers to that question.
Alex, I was thinking from where we started the conversation, where you kind of talked about the informality of TV often leading to a lot of these problems and the kind of freelance nature. I wondered, have you looked at other industries that maybe have similar structures to TV that might have done it correctly, or have you done any work to look around at other industries that have kind of nailed this problem or could hold up as a good example to kind of learn from, I guess?
Yeah, there are some interesting analogies, and perhaps they're not the things you first think of, but the construction industry is one that we've spoken about before, because it's, like in TV, it's predominantly freelance. You've got a large freelance workforce that work for quite a small number, actually, of big commissioners, that the equivalent, the big construction companies in that industry. There's, some, as you might expect, some real, or have been some real cultural issues, very predominantly male and macho culture, that had lent itself to serious mental health problems in that industry. And interestingly, the large construction companies came together a few years ago and created a new initiative called Mates in Mind, which was specifically to try and get people talking and supporting one another, and shift both the culture and the levels of support that are available within that industry. That has had some positive effects. So I think, whether or not there are very direct lessons there, I think it's heartening to know that where there is real, I think, evidence-based and collaborative action, that can have an effect. And that's, I suppose, the lesson that I think we need to take into our industry as well.
I was just thinking about, I just wanted to say that I think, Alex was saying before about how complicated it is, and it is so complicated because, apart from anything else, TV is it's full of creative people, it's full of passionate people. They've got really strong opinions, and they're up against shortening schedules and tight budgets. And I think it is easy for tempers to fray and things to get out of hand, but that's still completely different to bullying and harassment. And that's a line that everybody has to be really aware of. And it's just been undiscussed and unacknowledged for a long time that line's been crossed.
It's like a perfect storm almost, because you've got those crazy time pressures with budgets slipping down as it is, and then people being put in situations that aren't necessarily normal everyday working situations. It feels like the two have sometimes kind of combined to create these toxic environments. And something else I think we were thinking about is, maybe is there an issue of where the onus falls because of the nature of TV being a broadcaster producer relationship? Do you think it maybe needs to be more specific in terms of who is responsible for this stuff, broadcaster or producer, or is it a case of them always working together?
Well, I think it's, if you don't mind me going into that, I think it's pretty clear in contractual terms that a freelancer is employed by a production company, and it's therefore the production company that has a duty of care towards that individual. The issues come in where that production company, some are very large and some are very small. If that production company, and many do this brilliantly, but if that production company is not well resourced, or doesn't have those policies in place, or doesn't have the correct reporting channels or the correct support available to people, that's where the issues come in. And for commissioners and broadcasters, quite often they really don't have much visibility down their supply chain. It can be oftentimes hard for them to know what is happening, and therefore where they might need to have difficult conversations about how to improve working conditions. But I think I think all the conversations that we're having, including the one we're having today, is it does increase awareness of these issues, and it therefore does improve visibility. And I hope that will pave the way to action as well. Meriel, what do you?
I feel like the buck stops with the broadcaster, doesn't it? In the first instance, you'd go to the production company. And I think most places would want to resolve it, and would want to resolve it, the best way they could, and they would resolve it internally. And there's various things that have been suggested, that perhaps, if there's a complaint, perhaps the producer has to log it with the broadcaster. I don't know if that's particularly fair, but there's various ideas that have been put forward by people and that are being discussed. But I think ultimately the broadcaster needs to look and say, if there's been ultimate whisperings or complaints about a company, they need to look into that. They need to think about that.
And why would it be unfair for that system of a complaint being logged with a broadcaster?
Well, maybe it's not unfair. I'm just trying to think, it's got to be, we can't just get into a situation, obviously, where you can just make complaints against people and they are accepted. But, there has to be some give and take, doesn't there, on both sides? It can't just be, you can say anything you want about a company and then they go under. Nobody wants that. But yeah, we still need to take people seriously. We still need to listen to them.
Do you see that as a big problem at the moment? Do you see that everything that's going on right now, that could lead to a scenario where companies kind of are going under or kind of coming out on the wrong foot of situations?
I don't think it's at that point. I would hope that, you know, with my producer hat on, I'd hope that people can still, sort themselves out. And if there's a problem at an indie, I would hope that they would resolve it, address it, and move forward and be better. I would hope that people who work there feel that they're psychologically safe to work there, and that they can speak up and they can be heard and things can be addressed. And actually, I think that's quite an important term, being psychologically safe. Some of the reports I read from the Looking Glass survey, when people were saying that they'd like to be hit by a train on their way to work because not severely injured, but just enough to keep them off work for a bit. And that resonated with so many people that I spoke to. And that is terrible. But everybody went, oh yeah, I felt that stressed by the situation at work that I'd rather be off sick for a bit.
Yeah, some of the testimony in that survey was absolutely awful, wasn't it? I want, with your producer hat on, Meriel, you mentioned the day job. So do you feel like there's been a shift, like over the past however many years, in terms of all of this stuff, like on a day-to-day basis, or has it just kind of flatlined?
Well, I'm hearing good things, that people are putting phone numbers on call sheets about who to contact if you've got a problem, and if it's about bullying, harassment, or if it's about inappropriate behaviour in the workplace. This is the person to speak to, and this is the number, you know, whether that's HR or whether that's somebody in production. That's brilliant. I think that's a really good step. So that's just automatically letting you know that they acknowledge that things can't always be perfect, but there is a solution. They want to help. I think some people are talking to their teams at the beginning of a production and saying, this is how things should be run. These are my expectations. If there's a problem, this is what we should do. And I think that's great. Some of the time, if you're junior, you just don't know who you should talk to or how things are structured. So I think that's looking up. But I mean, I only started banging the drum about bullying about a year ago. So, you know, the film and TV charity have been doing brilliant work. Other people are doing great work as well. I think things are starting to shift, but I think we're at that point now where we're having the uncomfortable conversations before, you know, change is scary, but we are getting to the point where things are beginning to change.
Great, thank you for that. I wanted to kind of ask both of you, in terms of who and what organisations and what places should people be signposted to at this moment if they did want to report something. And then obviously there's been a big kind of a lot of people have been reaching out off the back of last week's kind of accusations, and I wondered if both of you now had a kind of second to kind of point some people in the right direction if they did have an issue or an incident they wanted to report. Alex, maybe you first.
Sure. Well, the first port of call should always be the employment channels, so the production company that you were employed by, where that incident happened. If it's not straightforward to figure out who that would be within the production company, then you should ask, I think, the production manager who you could speak to. If you need some support making that report, then that's part of the service that the charity, the film and TV charity, can provide. And part of the service of the Bullying Pathway service is to help support people use those channels, because sometimes, you know, if you've not done it before and you don't know what the process is going to be like, it can be quite an intimidating thing and quite a high, you know, mentally just quite a high hurdle to cross to start that conversation and begin that process. So we can help support you in that process and help you navigate it. There are also some services provided by the broadcasters. So, for example, Channel 4 has its Speak Up service that's available to freelancers as well. And actually through our website now, we have an anti-bullying directory of resources. So that's quite a good first port of call as well, where you'll see everything that we're currently aware of. That's a sort of evolving resource. So we will add names and routes for support and reporting to that directory as we go along. I'm sure Meriel will add that if you're a member of a union, then you can speak to your union as well for support and guidance. Clearly, if you're having a very serious, if there's a very serious mental health impact, then there may be different sources of support that you want to seek out, including Mind and the Samaritans as well. Meriel, do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, Bectu recently started an unscripted arm. They've traditionally been a scripted union for a long time, but unscripted covers things like entertainment, and that I think has been brilliant. So they can speak up for you. You can be anonymous, and they can take a complaint to your employers. And I think that can be really, really helpful if people are genuinely quite scared and worried about speaking up. There's also lots of really great things going on within the industry, with like the TV Mindset is a really good support. Obviously, Film and TV Charity, which, by the way, were the first people that I went to when I had a problem, and they were absolutely brilliant. Also, things like Women in Film and TV can give you support as well. So those are the main ones I'd say.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. We're so impressed by the work that you guys are doing, and hopefully things will continue to progress. So big thanks, and big thanks for joining us on the podcast. We couldn't quite let you go without asking you what you've been watching, which is our favourite question to ask our guests. So Meriel, you're looking slightly sheepish about it, but what have you been watching on TV?
What have I been watching? Oh God, probably something embarrassing.
Nothing's embarrassing.
I love Ghosts, BBC One Ghosts. I find that very silly and funny, by the Horrible Histories lot. Also been enjoying Call My Agent.
It feels like every podcast we've done lately, Call My Agent has been up there.
Is it? Yeah.
It's been the ringleader of the
shows.
It's
on the what we've been watching tally. I think it's winning. If such a tally existed. How about you, Alex? Are you another tally for Call My Agent?
No, I'm not actually. So that's a good tip. Thank you. I'll add that to my watch list. Like the rest of it,
love it.
I've been watching. I got slightly obsessive about Line of Duty in a potentially quite unhealthy fashion, reading lots of internet theories. And I think maybe the last episode I think was better than we all realised at the time we were watching it. And my light relief has been, I've been a bit late coming to Schitt's Creek, but it's
the best.
And I enjoy it very much. So that's at the end of a difficult day like the ones we've all had recently, a bit of Schitt's Creek is what cheers me up.
Yeah, Schitt's Creek is amazing. As well, when you get to the end, it's just a complete sob fest.
Oh,
I didn't know a comedy could make you cry quite so much as that did.
It's great. It's so good.
Well, thanks, guys, so much. It was really lovely to have you on. And to echo Max, you guys have been both doing incredible work in this space. And so thank you. And I hope that it kind of continues to grow. If you would like to speak to somebody about bullying and harassment, you can call the Film and TV Charity's 24-hour support line on 0800 054 0000 to speak to a bullying advisor. Or you can use our online resources at www.filmandtvcharity.org.uk/bullying. Thank you for listening to the Broadcast Newswrap with the fantastic duo of Alex Pumfrey and Meriel Beale. I've been Hannah Bowler, and I've been co-hosting with Max Goldbart. This podcast was edited by John Elms. You can check out past episodes of the podcast on Spotify and iTunes, or on the website via www.broadcastnow.co.uk.